Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm going to begin with something that we are all well used to in this place. I'm going to begin with a joke. Is that all right, Jeff?
It's forbidden in Philadelphia, but
Not in Tremor. Thank you. I remember once hearing about a rector who seemed to just go on and on in his parish. He'd been there for years and years. And people began to wonder, when is he ever going to go? And then at last, he announced he had decided to retire. Farewell evening was organised, and there was a lovely, lovely supper. And the old minister was presented with a gift. He couldn't wait to get home till he would see what was in his present. He opened a little box, and there inside was the loveliest pocket watch that he had ever seen. He admired it again and again, and he thought to himself, maybe my parishioners were more happy with me than I ever thought. He turned the watch over and he opened up the back, and inside was nothing, only a little note folded up which read, "If you come back, you'll get the works." Did you like that one, Jim? Try and be a wee bit more serious now. My association with this place began exactly 4 years prior to my ordination on the 24th of June 2004, a day which marked the birth of John the Baptist. Because in June 2000, I was commissioned as a diocesan reader right here in this cathedral. And so Dromore Cathedral is a very special place in my heart for quite some time now. And will continue, let me tell you, to have a very special place in my heart. When Joy and I arrived here, some 20 years ago, we didn't even need one hand to count the number of people that we knew. I knew just a couple of folk from my previous work. And Joy knew a few from her time as a nurse. And that was about it. And I well remember driving home in those early days, saying to Joy, "I know 6 people now. What about you?" And so as the years went by, we have been truly blessed by getting to know lots and lots of you people here in Dromore. It has all been quite amazing. And so today, I want to say a big thank you to many people who have guided and supported me from the very beginning of my journey towards and throughout Christian service. Especially want to say thank you to my own family, to Joy, to Gareth and Emma, Stuart and Ola, who have been and continue to be a great encouragement to me. And also thanks to my extended family, many of them are here this morning, for their support in so many ways. Thanks also to the rectors of my former parish for being so patient with me and for helping to guide me as I tried for many years to work through a sense of calling to ministry in the church. And I do want to say a big thank you to Stephen Lowry, who took me on as his assistant. What a brave man he was. I want to say thank you to Jeff for having me serve with him for the best part of 8 years now. And in particular for holding on to me when I found myself at one time having one foot here in the cathedral and the other one somewhere else. And that's going to give lots of you something to think about. But that's all I'm saying. So thank you, Jeff. Thanks also to you, the people of Dromore Cathedral, for your encouragement, your support, and your love during my time with you here. It has been such a privilege to have walked with you through the good days as well as some not so good days. And I can honestly say that I have always felt surrounded by people who really cared, and who knew that we were all in God's work together. I've already mentioned the support of my family, but I want to add a special word of thanks to Joy. She has been so faithful to me in my ministry here in Dromore, and her support has meant so much to me. You know what they say about clergy spouse? They're the ones who have to sit in the pew cringing because they don't know what's coming next in the sermon. So thank you, Joy, very much. But above all, I want to thank God for calling me to the ministry of His church. This last while I have been really reflecting on those days when that still small voice spoke into my life, and how I tried desperately for so long to hold back. But in the end, I could see that that call was not going to go away. So off I went, certainly not in my own strength, certainly not in my own ability, to begin ordination training. And looking back, I don't ever remember being called to be in any way popular. I don't remember being called to be highly thought of, in no way. I don't even remember being called to be successful, whatever that means, in the church today. But you know one thing I do remember, and that is that I was called to be faithful to that calling. And I have to say that at times I haven't always been faithful, but I suppose I have tried and I have done my best. We read earlier in our Bible reading about one who was completely faithful to his calling and eager to direct people away from himself and towards Jesus. Yes, Jeff has spoken about him already. His name was none other than John the Baptist. It seems that from that passage from John chapter 3, that John and Jesus were both on a mission. They were baptizing people, and they were preaching on the other side of the Jordan. And John's disciples were very, very quick to notice that people were beginning to turn away from him, and instead they were flocking to Jesus. We read, they came to John and said, Rabbi, that man who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one that you testified about, look, he is baptizing and everyone is going to him. I suppose when we think about it, in our own context today, how would any church congregation up and down this country react if another church started up in the area and was starting to draw people away from them? Would it not prompt feelings of competitiveness or even insecurity in any church leader? But John's response was none of these. He was not perturbed. Rather, he showed amazing Christian maturity and a deep spirituality. He does not entertain a shred of resentment. In fact, he was happy. He was full of joy to see Jesus' influence grow more and more as his grew less and less. We might ask ourselves, how can this be? Verse 27 of our reading says this: a person can receive only what is given from heaven. And what John, I believe, is saying here, it is Jesus alone who has come from heaven. It was Jesus alone who was sent by God, and Jesus alone who speaks the words of God himself. John was acknowledging that not only Jesus was supreme, he was supreme over everything and over everyone. He says just a little later from our passage, the one who comes from above is above all. The one who is from the earth belongs to the earth and speaks as one from the earth. John was only a voice. He was only a signpost to direct people to the Master. He always made it clear that he was not the Messiah. I was reading recently about the famous conductor, Leonard Bernstein. He was once asked in an orchestra, which of all the instruments was the hardest to play? And he replied, the second fiddle. He went on, I can get plenty of first violinists, but to find someone who can play the second fiddle well is always a problem. And if we have no second fiddle, well, we have no harmony. I think we all know that in life, playing second fiddle well is not such an easy task. It calls for a great measure of humility. But it is a task that in our Christian walk and service, we are all called to at times. A couple of weeks ago, I read these words from Scripture Union's Encounter with God, and some of you may also have read this. John the Baptist was neither threatened nor diminished by his second fiddle role, but found in it his richest and truest fulfillment. What an example of deep humility for each one of us to follow. John the Baptist was clearly secure in the knowledge that he was doing what God had called him to do and to be. And that was to be nothing other than being a friend to the group. I want to read out again verse 29. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. In the culture of Near Eastern weddings, the friend of the bridegroom was merely an assistant, working away in the background, making some very basic arrangements for the wedding. But when the bridegroom arrived, this friend was clearly full of joy to hear his voice. I suppose for us today, this friend would be the best man. So in that sense, John wanted only to be the best man to the divine bridegroom and to be full of joy to hear his voice. Our passage closes with these words. John the Baptist says, he, Jesus, must become greater. I must become less. And yet in a strange way, as John was becoming less in himself, in Jesus' eyes, he was becoming great. Didn't Jesus once say of him, among those born of a woman, there is not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. His greatness lay in him becoming less, so that Jesus would become greater. And for all of us, is not one of the great ironies of the Christian life, as we think of ourselves less, not less of ourselves, we are becoming great in the eyes of God. And as I finish, what a humble man was John the Baptist. His example must both challenge and encourage all of us here in this church this morning, and I include myself. And so let us each one live our lives in ways that would bring glory to Jesus and not to ourselves, because he must become greater and we must become less. And so, Jeff, I wish you and the people of Dromore Cathedral God's richest blessing in the days that lie ahead. Thank you very much.